2024 is the undisputed worst video games year of all time, especially if you don't like video games. Yes, sure, a couple games came out that the people who play video games enjoyed, but is that what gaming is about now? Is that the games industry we really want? One where gamers just play the best games by the studios that want to make good games? Where people are actually enjoying their free time away from their 12 kids and 6 jobs? Is this a society we can be proud of? If you go on social media or have a mental diet consisting entirely of games media and reliable journalists, you know this year has been an absolute nightmare. 2024 is the worst year for journalists. A year when a lot of anger has boiled over years of media spread misinformation, a blatant disregard for ethics in journalism, gaslighting that tries to obscure horrible industry practices, while also trying to cancel or bury innocent AA and indie studios. Forced moralism from spoiled college grads who have never touched a shovel, games reviews from where gamers and media are playing teeter-totter, reviews that get information incorrect as so-called professionals lack the expertise to complete tutorials or perform complex, novel game mechanics, such as jumping. And perhaps most importantly of all, journalists do not keep each other honest. They extort and bully AA studios. They had a monopoly on information and gaming opinions. Now, if a content creator does something wrong, other content creators line up at the door to rip that mother flipper down and give him the beats, eager to cover the story and make sure it gets a lot of eyes on it. When a journalist tries to crush a dev with proven lies, however, every other journalist sees the lie and repeats it, with the same phrases like one of those movies in a toy shop where all the talking dolls wake up at the same time. This shows why content creators are trusted while journalists are not. By calling out bad behavior in content creation, it makes people look at the space in a more positive light. That immediately sounds counterintuitive, right? Wouldn't people think higher of it if all wrongdoing was simply hidden from sight? But let's just think about this for a moment. People have grown more cynical and have been burned on so-called trusted institutions because, shocker, all the trusted institutions we trust are corrupt liars. So when wrongdoers are caught and dragged to the public square, it lets people know that when people do something bad, they will be called out. When you use the journalist strategy of doing something wrong, then attacking anyone who notices it or calls it out while defending the wrongdoing, everyone knows the game's media corporations will never be critical of anything on their side, while also going over the top to lie when it comes to harming studios, content creators, gamers who they consider not on their side. They kept up an illusion for years, but now that everyone has seen behind the curtain, there is no going back. Unlike content creators and influencers that need to be self-made, journalists are employed by massive corporations in total collusion. This means stepping out of line risks ostracization and cancellation, not just at their job, but across the entire industry. Over the past decade and a half, people who do not obey have been systematically removed from the games industry, and those remaining will not call each other out when they behave unethically. For a while, that worked to some extent because people did not look into it. But every time the journalist got something wrong, told a lie, or review boosts a game that turns out to be garbage, people trust them just a little bit less. 2024 was the year the dam burst. The cracks had just added up to too much damage to their facade. Gamers are into gaming, not to listen to journalists, follow drama, or know the personal lives of developers. Gamers are into gaming to play video games. This may sound painfully obvious, but this is something that the current woke corporatism does not understand. Gamers in general will just play games as long as the games are good. But when the games start to consistently suck, that is when gamers start to pay attention to the why. When you go to a pub you like, chances are you know nothing beyond your top dishes there and what sport they tend to play. But if you get food sick there 3 times in a row, you're going to be checking food inspector reports, or, more likely, just never eating there again. People rarely pay attention when things are going well. And the irony here is, if woke games were actually good, there would be zero audience for the people saying woke games are bad. We need to keep it in mind. It is not the anti-woke crowd that called for people to know the identities of game developers, to know their politics. It is not gamers who looked into the political leanings of the journalists. It was journalists and developers who are ideologically captured who made it very, very clear everyone needed to know about their identity, their politics, and most of all, how much they hate gamers. When you want to know about a product before you buy, you may check 1, maybe 2 reviews from somewhere you are used to looking. If one day, though, you buy a game or watch a show that a reviewer claimed was amazing and it was terrible, you might brush it off. However, once it becomes 2, 5, 10 games, at some point you will look at it and just say, okay, this site or this influencer clearly doesn't match my tastes. You get a second opinion at a different website. Oh, they like the trash game too. And oddly, they're saying the exact same praises. They're making the same claims. They're avoiding the elephant in the room problems, and so on. It can take a while, but once you realize all the games media sites parrot the same opinions and are fully in opposition of people who play video games, you lose trust in them, and you more eagerly look for someone you can trust. Since those people do not exist in games media, though, gamers went elsewhere. This year, that sentiment exploded. Most gamers didn't even know what Gamergate was. But basically, journalists were caught taking bribes for reviews over a decade ago. And instead of calling it out, like they should have done, journalists went on the attack against anyone who noticed and took issue with it. Because the issue of bribes for reviews was far more widespread than anyone knew, and they had to cover their tracks. At the same time, they were effective, mostly using fear, intimidation, calling anyone who spoke out against it racist or sexist at a time when that sort of allegation was career-ending, doxing people, calling people's workplaces to get them fired, forming groups of journalists behind the scenes that stalked and harassed anyone in the industry that took issue with it. Since their extremism was so violently effective before, journalists jumped on an opportunity to reignite Gamergate at the start of 2024 with what some call Gamergate 2. They thought they could discourage anyone from talking about their blackmail tactics, which they call consulting, by completely burying anyone who talked about, in this particular case, Sweet Baby Inc., one of the many consulting corporations in the blackmail cartel. However, this time people are far more tired of it and considerably more aware of the tactics. So when journalists attempted to use this to bully their critics again, it not only didn't work, but it peeled back their own masks. And now everyone knows what they're up to. Journalists were caught doxing, threatening influencers, going after their families, trying to smear and ruin the jobs of people. They were caught spreading misinformation against influencers they hate, while the rest of the journalist community gave it their tacit approval by refusing to call out or even acknowledge it. Journalists have been revealed to have considerable animosity toward content creators, who were instrumental in unveiling media corruption, and who are competing for market share as corporate journalists can only remain relevant with the backing of wealthy media companies. Artificial intelligence can already write more human-sounding articles as their managers look to replace them, and their journalism talents won't help them go solo since they spend more time insulting their potential audience rather than trying to build them up. Gamers are some of the most sympathetic people in the world. For decades, they will get angry about studio closures and layoffs. They will blame the executives and management in almost any situation and side with the developers. If a game does poorly, gamers assume execs have interfered with the developer's vision, not giving enough time or money, too much crunch, a toxic workplace, or many more reasons. Nobody cares if this happens to manufacturing workers, fast food, packaging, farming, but gamers are more passionate about the products and the people who make the product than any other market. Gamers have always been the least toxic community to be part of as a creator because it's the only or at least one of the only industries where the customer is willing to go to bat for the person making the product. 2024, however, saw the limit to that patience. When you attack your audience far too much, they will eventually grow tired of it, and after that, even grow to want your downfall. A gamer that has been treated like an ally is going to be the best consumer ally you can hope for. And when you look at indie or AA studios, gamers will have their backs as long as gamers are treated with respect. But a gamer that has been treated like an enemy, as journalists have done for years to gamers, is also going to be a far more determined and dedicated foe. Journalists did all they could to build this situation. And as AI chips away at their gerbs, influencers chip away at their corporate share of bribe reviews, game studios start to use demos to generate hype instead of relying fully on journalists, and content creators take most of their audience, journalists and toxic developers will call 2024 the worst year in gaming, still lashing out, which is only revealing more and more of their flaws. Any expectation that they speak for the gaming audience is gone. They are no longer consumer advocates providing reliable information for your gaming purchases, but they are part of the PR branch of AAA game studios obscuring any issues as they try to earn a sale like a sleazy used car hustler. And if we were to look at some of the biggest bombs of the year, they are almost entirely made up of games journalists tried to prop up and developers attacked gamers over. So let's take a moment to celebrate what made 2024 the worst year in the games industry. Redfall has closed down. Ubisoft's The Crew is screwed. Ubisoft's X-Defiant got X'd. Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws gave everyone a bad feeling about this. Ubisoft's Prince of Persia sold like a pauper. Ubisoft's Division Heartland divided by zero. Ubisoft's Skull and Bones sunk on its maiden voyage. Ubisoft's Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is a frontier unexplored. And Ubisoft's, that might be it. Oh right, they released an NFT game. I don't have a quip for that one. They're just retarded, there's nothing more to say. Never thought we'd see the day when hearing Ubisoft's name would be so delightful. At least they have Assassin's Creed Shadows next year to save their company. The first Assassin's Creed game set in an African colony that will be releasing during Black History Month because they're so thoughtful and virtuous. I'm sure it'll do very well. Kill the Justice League, killed the Arkham series and the studio. Kenzera Zhao was beloved by the modern audience on Twitter, who showed how much they truly support games made for them by not buying it. Flintlock Siege of Dawn, yes, that came out this year and you've forgotten it already. How could you? It was the future of woke gaming. With any luck. Dustborn to the Dustbin, Unknown 9, completely unknown, Dragon Age the Veilguard, a complete return to form, and an absolute triumph. And Concord. Oh, Concord. The quintessential IGN 7 out of 10. Dead in a week after $400 million and one of the biggest games media advertising campaigns ever. And there is no game more perfect than Concord. The one game which showcased exactly how we all feel about AAA, morality-pushing garbage, ugly character design, extremist ideology, the way rich corporations make soulless games and the lying games media supports them. Concord is to woke video games what the Titanic is to playing chicken with an iceberg. These DEI designed by committee, journalist beloved games on the right side of history saw less action this year than the salad bar at a steak and wings buffet. But if you are not feeling the same level of pessimism, and I have not convinced you that 2024 is the worst year in the games industry, check the link in the description for why 2024 was the best year in the games industry instead. And a happy new year to all.